It's Wednesday, and you all know what that means. It's time for another episode of the Life in the Movies podcast. I'm one of your co hosts. My name is Ryan Cam. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This week, Jacob and I are going to be catching up on Jessica Jones, doing our usual what we've been watching lately, and, well, we've been kind of covering some more negative stories with the whole WB fiasco. So we're going to do something positive and talk about actors who made triumphant comebacks in honor of Brendan Fraser and Fraser Mania about to be running wild with Darren Aronofsky's The Whale. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But first, I got to introduce my co-host, Jacob Martin. Jacob, how you doing, good sir?
I'm doing great. It's been a good week so far. I'm excited. We're about to do a collab on my channel where we'll be covering Richard Donner's final film, 16 Blocks. I'm looking forward to that for one thing. And I'm excited to be talking about, actors making comebacks because I always love a good success story in Hollywood where somebody started out good, something, an issue came about and they made a big comeback and they're still as beloved as they once were. So I think it's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, and I think, like you just brought up, I will be on your channel talking about 16 Blocks, a movie that I personally think is just very underrated. I love that movie to pieces, and I am so looking forward to discussing that with you. It's going to be on your channel. This is going to be dropping Wednesday, and that review will be Thursday at 9 o'clock Eastern over on his channel. So if you haven't checked out Jacob's channel, it will be linked in the description of the video. Do go ahead and go subscribe and turn on the notifications. That way you all will know when that stream is happening. All right, Jacob. Well, let's talk about some stuff we've been watching lately. So, what have you been watching lately?
Well, I haven't been posting as many videos as I have been. I decided to not post as many videos. I felt like I was getting a little too obsessive about uploading videos, so I decided to scale it back a little bit since coming back from vacation. I will say I'll talk about 16 Blocks when we do the stream this Thursday, which I thought was a pretty good movie for what it is. But another video coming on my channel is Richard Donner's second to last film, a movie called Timeline, which was released in 2003. This was based off the novel of the same name by Michael Crichton, I think is how you pronounce his last name. If that name sounds familiar, that's the guy who wrote Jurassic Park. So this guy is a big deal in the world of literature. Timeline follows a group of archaeologists who end up somehow transporting back in time to the 14th century France. And the main character's dad got stuck in the past. And so he and his crewmates go to the 14th century to save his dad, pretty much. The movie actually does have a pretty solid cast. The lead is Paul Walker. I haven't seen him in much stuff outside of the Fast and Furious films, and I thought he was pretty solid in this movie. That he left us way too soon, sadly. You also got Billy Connolly, who plays his dad. Gerard Butler is in this movie, among other actors that show up. The movie is kind of fun to watch, especially when we're in the past. It's set during this conflict between England and France. There's actually some good battle sequences in the movie. I like that the film uses mainly practical action instead of CGI, which was actually pretty refreshing considering what time the movie came out in. Where the movie falls apart for me, I wish the film stuck in its historical setting because the sci-fi, the time travel stuff didn't really work for me personally. It was just too convoluted of a movie to set that up to where they set it up. It does the timeline and the past stuff, and the movie didn't really dive into the time travel stuff well. So when they bring that back throughout different parts of the story, it got ridiculously convoluted and hard to get into. Also, I found the characters a little underwritten as well. It's a movie that, I mean, it has good production value in it, but it's definitely not one of Richard Donner's most memorable movies. But It's an okay movie for what it is, just definitely not up to the director's best movies, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, when your filmography includes the first Lethal Weapon and the first Superman, that's like it's hard to live up to that legacy like every time, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I was shocked when I watched the movie thinking, oh, this movie's an okay movie. I'm sure people liked it fine, but no, it has like a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the film I think lost a lot of money for Richard Donner. It was one that lost I think so much, and people just forgot about it. I'd never even heard of this movie until going through his filmography.
Yeah, well, Paul Walker he's primarily known for Fast and Furious and he's good in those, but he was actually in a Disney movie that I think is quite underrated called Eight Below. Jacob, I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
I've heard of it, but I've never seen it.
I think you should do a celebrating Disney on it. I think it is quite good. It's about Paul Walker who works in the Arctic and has a group of sled dogs. And because the weather gets so bad there one time, he has to leave his lab behind and his dogs. But the dogs eventually get free and they go to find him when he leaves the sanctuary to go find them. It's actually quite a heartwarming story. I'm not really a dog person, but that's like one of my favorite dog movies, other than like Marley and Me.
Mm. So that sounds like it's up my alley because I am a dog person. So
Yeah, you would really, really, really like it, I think.
yeah, I definitely need to check that one out. Thank you, Ryan, for the recommendation. Another movie. I actually saw this in theaters this past weekend. This past Saturday was the $3 ticket day, so I went to the cinemas and finally saw Bullet Train, and that movie was a load of fun. It's one of my favorite movies of the year, especially on an action level. I've been a fan of David Leitch's previous work, especially on John Wick and Deadpool 2. I love the style of fight choreography that he brings in all his movies, the hand to hand stuff, the wide shots, and everything. It goes double in Bullet Train. I think the movie does have an excellent cast. Where you got Brad Pitt, who's excellent in the lead. I like the irony that his character is named Ladybug, but yet he has bad luck. I thought that was pretty funny. I love the characters Lemon and Tangerine, played by Brian Tyree Henry and Aaron Taylor Johnson. They got the biggest laughs. And growing up watching Thomas the Tank Engine, the fact that there was a running gag involving Thomas the Tank Engine and all the characters got some of the best laughs out of me watching the whole movie. I think the story is a little convoluted at times. Like it's one where you have to sit down and pay attention to the movie. If you get easily distracted, this movie will throw you off quick because it's a bunch of assassins after the same thing, and they double cross, betray, and even kill each other in the process. I'm trying to go as vague as possible here, but yeah, it's a little convoluted, and the movie I think goes past the point of disbelief in the third act. I love the practical action in throughout most of the movie, but the third act goes a little too far fetched to where I was a little bit taken out of the movie. I'm like, it's still a good payoff, but I wish it kept the practical action to keep the film as believable as the rest of the movie was. Those are my two small gripes that I have with the film. Overall, I had a great time with Bullet Train, and I think it's up there. It definitely doesn't beat Top Gun Maverick. It's still the best full on action movie of the year, but Bullet Train comes very, very close. I had a lot of fun with this one.
Yeah, I remember when Brian Tyree Henry's character, I can't remember if he was Lemon or
I
Tangerine
think
or if
he
it's
was Lemon, I think.
he was Lemon, thank you. But when Lemon was just he was starting quoting Thomas the Tank Engine, I was just in there like, really? What were the Wiggles too busy for that? But in the grand scheme of things, it kind of makes sense. I did not think that it would, but it actually kind of worked for what it was. And yeah, this is I've seen like some discourse that this is like David Leitch trying to be like Tarantino but on a train. And I have a feeling that Tarantino's movies have just gotten this syndrome of you get a bunch of charismatic people in one setting, and it's just like you're automatically going to say, oh, it's Tarantino, or it's a Tarantino knockoff. I mean, I feel like the movie's kind of like Bad Times at the El Royale, but on a train. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie,
I
but
have seen that. That was so underrated. I love that movie.
at first I was like, this one's a bit too long. I don't know. But the more I've thought about it, the better it has gotten. Like the cast of characters in that is so layered, and you got Chris Hemsworth like eating this pie and like dancing to Hush by Deep Purple, and you're just like, Hemsworth understood the assignment. He really did.
Definitely was against type, that's for sure.
Oh, definitely. Because, when you think of like a David Koresh type cult leader, the last person you think of is Chris Hemsworth. But he pulled it off for sure. And the more I've thought about Bullet Train, the better it's gotten in my head. I don't know. I'm thinking it might appear on my underrated, overlooked list at the end of the year, but that field's getting pretty crowded. I'm gonna have to make some difficult cuts, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely going to consider it at the
Yeah,
very.
it'll be interesting because I think the film has a mixed reaction from critics overall. But when I saw it on National Cinema Day, packed packed house, by the way, there was so much laughter throughout the course of the movie. It seemed like so many people were having a ball with this movie. So I'm sure this movie's turning out very well.
Yeah, and it was actually, I ended up seeing one of my choices, Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul. I saw that on National Cinema Day, and I was thinking, oh, it's probably going to be a pretty quiet night. No, I had trouble parking, and it's looking like Honk for Jesus is going to underperform, which, I mean, it is what it is there. But I got a quieter theater, but like I had trouble getting in line like to get my water at concessions. It was like
Yeah.
I cannot remember a time recently where that has happened. Maybe when Top Gun Maverick was initially coming out, then it was like really busy then. But I mean, I don't want to get it too ahead of myself or ourselves, but people worried because of the pandemic and theaters closing, and is like, oh, this is the end. It's not the end just yet. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I think ever since the pandemic has happened, this was probably the busiest time I've ever been to a movie since then. I think National Cinema Day, at least for I think, was a big success. I got there I think about 20 minutes before the showing was about to start, but the parking lot was almost full. I got in, there were about 4 or 5 lines in the concession stands, all backed up all the way to the door. So I pretty much had to wait like 20 minutes before I was able to purchase my ticket and concessions. And even then, it was like 5 minutes after the movie was supposed to start. But thankfully, there was some preview showing. I didn't miss a thing because movie theaters love their movie trailers. So I still had plenty of time to get in there regardless. But yeah, I'm glad they did this National Cinema $3 ticket day. I hope these chains do it more often, whether once a month or they make it a annual thing every September. I actually thought that was a brilliant idea to bring people back into cinemas.
Yeah, whoever came up with that definitely deserves a raise. So, Jacob, what else you got?
I think that's about it. What have you been watching?
Well, quite a bit actually. So first up, I watched for the first time Train Spotting. This is the 1996 film directed by Danny Boyle. It's not his directorial debut, but it's the one that put him on the map. And not gonna lie, that video that I did on that, which by the way you can check out on my channel if you so desire, that video blew up. I think as of this recording, it's at 2,200 views. I was just like, and I did not see it coming, and so I'm truly grateful for the success of that. But I'm glad it was for a movie like Train Spotting, because that movie, it affected me like deeply. Like it's a very well-made movie. It's a very dirty feeling movie. They captured like the smackhead existence in a way that you couldn't imagine. And uh, it's a very distressing movie too. I mean, There are some scenes I won't spoil it in case any of you or Jacob you haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
I've seen it.
All right, well, I'll go vague just for the sake of, but when Renton is going through those hallucinations, holy wow, that was just crazy. And then on top of that, you got stand-up performances from Johnny Lee Miller and Ewan McGregor. And Ewan McGregor, this was in 1996. 3 years after this, he was Obi-Wan Kenobi in in The Phantom Menace. So to go from Renton to Obi-Wan Kenobi, that dude's got range. That's all I'm going to say. And so I was not expecting Train Spotting to hit like that, but it hit me like a train, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I saw the movie once. I thought it was well made. I liked the performances, especially Ewan McGregor. But I don't know. This movie didn't really do much for me. I liked the approach it was going, but because I didn't resonate with any of the characters, it just came off a bit hollow to me. But I do respect all the love and praise that it does have. And Danny Boyle is a fantastic director. I mean, look no further than Slumdog Millionaire, Yesterday, 127 Hours. He has a great track record. I'm just not as big on Train Spotting compared to most.
All right, well, I suggest you watch it again because it's better than you remember. That's for certain. And then, as of this recording, it is in early September, and I have begun preparations for my Scary Mania series, watching a ton of horror movies over the next several weeks. So I'm starting, and I've watched four of my selected 31, so I'm just going to breeze through them. I watched Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula's Daughter, Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man, and Godzilla Raids Again. My theme for this year is going to be all sequels to stuff that I've reviewed in the past. I've seen Bride of Frankenstein before. I think it's one of the best horror sequels of all time. They took everything from the first Frankenstein, the first Universal Frankenstein, and they capitalized on it and added more good stuff on there. I would argue that Bride of Frankenstein is more iconic than the first Frankenstein because we get the bride, we get Dr. Pretorius, you get Frankenstein's classic lines like fire bad and all of that. You get the hermit and just so many iconic things. And it's way ahead of its time too, especially in the effects department. That's all I will say. But it's Bride of Frankenstein is definitely one that I highly recommend to everyone. Dracula's Daughter was one that I had no idea what to expect because it's the sole Universal Dracula sequel. Bela Lugosi's Dracula would appear in movies like House of Frankenstein and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, but he wasn't a big fan of being Dracula in these movies because he didn't want to be typecast. So this movie came about because of him not wanting to do it, but they wanted to make another Dracula movie because it was so popular. So they just made it a movie about Dracula's daughter. And the role ended up being played by Gloria Holden. And Holden actually went on record saying that she just wasn't a fan of horror movies and she thought they were beneath her. But she was ironically the best part of the movie and made it interesting because she plays like the role where she hates her father. She doesn't want any part of this vampire business, but slowly start to see her being dragged towards it. But I'll go into that when I get there. Abbott and Costello Meet the Invisible Man is a personal favorite of mine and my dad's. Abbott and Costello are just phenomenal. I just love those two so much. And watching this one, I used to think Invisible Man was my favorite, but honestly, I think Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein might be my favorite because Invisible Man is really good and the effects largely still hold up, but I think it's a bit sillier. And I think Meet Frankenstein is a bit more scarier, but I'll have to watch it again. And then there's Godzilla Raids Again, which is the first canonical sequel to the Japanese Godzilla, the first one, the 1954 version. Godzilla basically targets Osaka, and it's more of Godzilla doing Godzilla things. And Unfortunately, a lot of the effects do not hold up here. There's legitimately a shot where you just see the Godzilla hand puppet, and it's like it's just sitting there, and you're like, this is in the Criterion collection, huh? And so it's one of those things where you're just like the wisdom of it. But they made it work with the budget that they had, and it was a financial success. But next up on the list that I have to watch is The Creature Walk, or not The Creature Walks Among Us, Return of the Creature. I know how to speak, which is the debut of Clint Eastwood, and that was his first film role. So, starting off Scary Mania and my watching and my researching and my note taking because October's going to be crazy busy. That's all I will say.
Yeah, I can't wait to see all those videos. And I've seen all the movies that you've mentioned. Bride of Frankenstein's a classic. I think of all the Universal monster movies, that one might just be my favorite because I think that one's held up the best as far as story goes, the effects and makeup, and just being a good sequel in general. Like you said, it took everything that made the first movie so good and just embraced it even more in this sequel. And it's one of the best sequels of all time because of it. I have seen Dracula's Daughter. That was an interesting sequel. Like, I was shocked at the turns that they took with Dracula's Daughter and some of the ways that she went about her victims. I'm like, I don't know how you got away with that in 1936, but some of the subtext, yeah, it's a bit interesting. That's all I'll say there. And then I actually had never watched any Abbott and Costello movies until last year. Because I actually have a box set of all the Universal monster movies, and three of them are on there. So I discovered them for the first time in 2021. The Frankenstein one is great. I love that one. The other ones I don't think are as memorable, but they're still pretty fun for what they are. And I think I saw Godzilla Raids again once, and it didn't really do much for me compared to the original. So
Yeah, and a bit of a cheap plug. Jacob's going to be a part of Scary Mania 3 as well. He's going to be a part of talking about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And oh boy, I can't wait to watch that for the first time.
same here. I've heard it's crazy.
All right, well, to wrap up my portion, just the other night I saw Honk for Jesus Save Your Soul. This was a movie that I've been looking forward to because the trailers really intrigued me. This is from Jordan Peele's production company, Monkey Paw. He did not direct it, he was just a producer. And Daniel Kaluuya also produced it as well. This is directed by the Ibu brothers. I hope I'm saying their name right. And it tells the story of Lee Curtis Childs and Trinity Childs. They're a married couple who run the Walk the Greater Paths Baptist Church. It's basically a mega church, kind of like a Joel Osteen or a Kenneth Copeland. And after a scandal, they basically have to close and are planning a relaunch, but the community's not exactly happy about the news. This movie was a bit weird. Like, not just weird in terms of like it was just weird in terms of subject matter, or not because of the subject matter, but because of some of the decisions that were made. Sterling K. Brown and Regina Hall were the highlights of the movie. Regina Hall has a monologue in the movie where it just, I was just like, if this movie gets nominated for anything, it's going to be for Regina Hall for that scene alone. It probably won't be nominated for much, but if it is, then it'll be on the strength of that. Sterling K. Brown is predictably really good here as well, and the two work in tandem together, but it's the Regina Hall show. She was great. And I don't know how to like put this without spoiling anything, but basically this is a movie about a fictional megachurch, and it's seemingly done in a mockumentary style, but at the same time, it's also done in a way where you also see like the true feelings of the people involved, and it's done in a way where you can clearly see, oh, this is the mockumentary version, and oh, this is the real version. But the two kind of blend together to the point where I was just in there like, what's real and what's fake anymore? And it's not even like in the good sense. It's kind of in the what's happening kind of sense. And again, without spoiling anything, we don't really know what the scandal was that Lee Curtis Childs got indicted for. Uh, it's severely hinted at, and it's definitely something that is pretty bad. But at the same time, you just don't know. It's more hinted at than actually done. And there's a lot of loose threads, like because the Childses are getting older, and there's another church trying to do the same thing, and they're way younger and hipper. Uh, the two have marital problems, and Regine Hall is like trying to stay strong, but at the same time, like she's not really feeling it. And there's just a strange scene where she becomes, I don't even know how to describe it without just sounding like really weird. I don't know, it's one of the movies where I was just sitting there like, why did you make these decisions? It's very well made, very well acted, but it's like one of the biggest question marks of the year. That's all I'm gonna say.
It sounds like one of those well-intentioned but badly executed kind of movies, mixed bag.
Yeah, and there was also kind of a thing that confused me was it was clearly meant to do some kind of commentary on religion or these mega churches, which in terms of the latter, I'm personally not a fan of. I'm not a big fan of the Copeland and those types. But at the same time, like go all the way with it. It just feels like it's started in the commentary, but then is kind of like not followed through on. There's several plot threads that I just don't think are capitalized on to their fullest potential.
Yeah, you gotta hate it when a movie, it looks good in the marketing, but then you watch it, it just becomes Like, what was the point of that movie?
Yeah, exactly. It's something like that. I give it a bit of a modest recommendation if you're into something like that, but it's also again a bit of a like I said, biggest one of the biggest question marks of the year so far. And that's all that I've been seeing. Actually, one more thing. I started watching The Patient, which is a FX/Hulu exclusive series. It stars Steve Carell and Domhnall Gleeson. Steve Carell is a therapist, and Domhnall Gleeson is the patient. And this is not a spoiler, I promise. It's in all the marketing. After an incident, Carell wakes up in Domhnall Gleeson's basement, chained to a bed, and Gleeson is convinced that Gleeson is a serial killer. They say it in the marketing, like he's pretty much a serial killer and hates it and is trying to get fixed, but the only way that he knows how is to kidnap his therapist and chain him to a bed in his basement. I mean, not to the point where he's like chained like that, like all fours, like he can't move, but chained by the ankle to a post. And it's also Carell's character's gone through a recent tragedy. His wife passes away before the series starts. And 2 episodes in, it's really a quite interesting little series. It's a mini series. It's only 10 episodes, and we're only 2 in. So it could go south. But at the same time, I actually think that this is off to a really, really solid start, and I give this one a modest recommendation. If not for anything else, Steve Carell and Domhnall Gleeson sharing the screen together.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty awesome. I have to check that out. If anything, it sounds like something better worth watching compared to the garbage show I'm watching with She-Hulk. Oh my gosh. That was if you saw that last episode with the twerking, that is like the worst thing I've seen in the MCU. Like, what were you thinking, Marvel? That was so cringe.
One thing I can definitively say, no one has twerked on the patient, and I hope that they keep it that way. But what have you all been watching lately? Leave that in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. All right, Jacob. Well, let's dive into some Jessica Jones talk. We haven't talked about this show in a while. Let's cover episodes 8 and 9, starting off with Jessica Jones episode 8. Jessica Jones episode 8, aka WWJD question mark. And the synopsis is as follows. Jessica Jessica experiences a strange homecoming courtesy of Kilgrave. Hogarth's conflict with her estranged wife reaches a tipping point. So we're going to be covering 2 episodes of the show in this episode, and so we'll just be talking about episode 8 for right now. So Jacob, what did you think of episode 8?
I loved it. I just love seeing the continued conflict with Jessica and Kilgrave. And I was kind of thrown for a loop in this episode because at first you get to the story and Jessica hatches a plot to try to use their past history to try to manipulate Kilgrave into thinking he can use his powers for good. And I was a bit taken aback by that. I'm like, Jessica, you know this is the guy who abused you all this time, right? We're gonna do that whole mentality where, you know, you can just forget all that and try to do an easy switch like that. I think it's a bit more complicated. And I felt a little uncomfortable with that. But then you realize, she was just playing him the whole time and using that, her manipulation to actually capture him, kidnap him, and lead into the next episode. I'm like, okay, this is actually pretty brilliant. I do like the strategy. I like that we learn more about Jessica's past and what happened to her family. That was actually pretty sad and tragic. And, I can see why an event like that would cause Jessica to be the way that she was. A couple other shocks been in there too, especially the whole bomb explosion. That kind of caught me off guard too. The subplot with Hogarth and her estranged relationship. I mean, I like Carrie Ann Moss, but I feel like they're extending that subplot a little too much to where it takes away from the stuff I was invested in. Like, it's not a bad subplot by any means, and I think if it was its own thing, it would be kind of more interesting. But it was not. It took away a little bit from what I loved about the show, and as much as I love Carrie Ann Moss as an actress, that subplot's kind of stretching itself too thin, in my opinion. The rest of the episode is really good, and it's one of the highlights of the series so far.
Yeah, dude, I feel the exact same way about the Carrie Ann Moss stuff. No offense against her. She's a great actress, and I think she's doing her role very well here. But yeah, whenever this was on screen, I was just sitting there like, guys, like just figure something out. Like just cut bait. Like it's clear you all don't like each other. Just make this amicable, like, or do something with it. Because is like between that and the Hope Schlottman stuff, which is still a thing, like 8 episodes in, 9 episodes in, just like this should at this point this should be the Jessica Jones slash Kilgrave show. Like it should be the battle between those two. Trish and Will, yeah, they're supplementary players, but they're important too. But it's like I don't know. I'm not a fan of it. Hopefully it leads somewhere. I'll keep my options open for it leading at least somewhere, but for right now I'm not feeling it.
Yeah, same here. But the rest of the episode, I think, is really, really good. So many good standout moments in the entire episode. I think I was on edge more so by the servants Kilgrave was hosting because there were some parts where they were willing to slice their own necks at points. I'm like, eesh.
Yeah, what did you think? Because we learned some parts about Kilgrave's like childhood. What did you think about that? Do you like him being a bit more mysterious, or what do you think about that?
I'm kind of in the middle on that. I like that we learn more about what made Kilgrave tick, and usually when you're dealing with somebody as sick and twisted, it's usually because of abuse from parents, and I could definitely see that. But I did like the mysterious approach of Kilgrave at the same time, where he's always hiding in the shadows, he's always tricksy and very manipulative. I didn't mind the additional backstory because it's always, I guess, kind of interesting learning about villains. But I guess it's one of those I can take it or leave it. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
There's a part of me that like it's kind of similar to Thanos and how the reasons why he wants to wipe out half the universe is because his home planet died. It at the same time, it's like you there's a part of you that wants to like understand that to understand where he's coming from, but at the same time, you kind of don't, because it's even scarier not to know, like, or outside of like a vague sense of justice. I don't know, but at the same time, it's interesting because like Kilgrave is just such a horrible person. At the same time, like everyone gets their start somewhere, and I guess in episode 9 we learned that pretty much he was a human experiment, pretty much. But I guess this is as good a place as any to talk about episode 9, unless you have something about 8 you want to bring up.
I think that's about it on 8. Let's get into the real meat of the 2 episodes.
All right, well, episode 9 is called AKA Sin Bin. Just when Jessica has Kilgrave right where she wants him, Hogarth's involvement complicates the situation. Details of Kilgrave's past emerge. Now, this episode on IMDb is the highest at a 9.0. It's like episode 8 is at an 8.9. Episode 9 is at a 9.0. So we're getting into like the true, like the good stuff right here. What'd you think of the episode?
Yeah, of the 2, I like this one more. I love the conflict of Jessica and Kilgrave, her desperate attempts to make a confession out of him. He's, of course, being tricksy and manipulative, and doesn't finds ways to get around that, even in the situation he's in. I like the search where Jessica finds Kilgrave's parents. I thought that was a great touch. Very frustrated by Hogarth in this episode. Not just the subplot, which is stretching itself too thin, but her involvement in this thing and trying to be like the peacemaker and all this and not knowing who to trust. That really frustrated me because, yeah, you should have trusted Jessica the whole time. You know, she had that experience with Kilgrave. You should have just listened on her words, but you know, she had to put things in her way, and her compromise kind of messed things up by the end of the episode, and it led to some pretty shocking stuff. It ends on a very ambiguous note. I don't know where it's going to lead next. I'm really curious about where Jessica is at the end of the episode because, like with the best of Daredevil, when it ended, I was ready to see more.
Yeah, and the ending of this episode, I feel like they're going in the direction where it seems like Jessica is immune to Kilgrave's power, because Kilgrave is literally like they're in like a tug of war like this, and he
Yeah.
says, "Let go of me, Jessica," and you're like, and she like doesn't let go, and then he like turns to like, "Get her off me, officer," and like the cop
Yeah.
tackles her. It seems like they're going in the direction where Jessica is like, "All right, enough of the games. Like I'm immune. I'm going after you."
Yeah, that is an interesting interpretation. I was a bit taken aback by what they were trying to hint because I was in utter shock of what just happened. But that is an interesting direction, and I can definitely buy that. After being manipulated and abused for so long, I think she's like, enough of this crap. I'm ready to take you out by any means necessary. So yeah, I can believe that. Uh, I think what do you think of the whole thing with Will and his insistence on that doctor? Like, what was that all about?
Well, I
Um,
mean, the doctor was Kilgrave's mom, so it was all leading up to a whole big thing.
no, I was talking about Will, the police officer. When he
Oh,
got
Dr. Kozlov. Oh,
Kozlov. Yeah, it was. I knew it started with a K. I
I
was
honestly don't know. I mean, it's Marvel, so I imagine they didn't just invent him for the show. I imagine that there's something to do with that, but maybe it's planting seeds or something in season 2. I have not seen it, but it could be leading towards something for that. It'll be interesting if they follow through on that. But what you think of that like torture room that Jessica had set up for him? It is like Kilgrave is like Kilgrave is a horrible person, but I mean, like water's all over the floor, like you're listening to like your childhood trauma, like you being like poked and prodded just like on a loop, and if you get out of line you're electrocuted. Is like, I mean, it's Kilgrave, so he's clearly evil, but at the same time it's like, I don't know. It's like one of those things where I wouldn't do that to my worst enemy.
Yeah, that was like a really bad form of torture in general. I mean, I was, it's Kilgrave we're talking about. So I'm like, yeah, do all these things to him. He's like such an evil person, but at the same time, I wouldn't want it flipped to where the wrong person gets a hold of the technology and uses it on innocent people because that would be horrible.
Yeah, keep in mind that this is no sympathy for the devil or anything. He is the devil, but at the same time, it's like limits, like limits. Let's consider that now. But
Yeah, there we go.
best episodes of the show so far?
Toss up between that and episode 7. I can't decide which one's better.
Yeah, we're definitely in the prime of this season, that is for sure. But what did you all think of these two episodes? If you have seen them, leave them in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. All right, Jacob, let's get into the main event for the evening. And I came up with the inspiration for this because as of this recording, TIFF is either happening or is about to happen. And the premiere of Darren Aronofsky's new movie, The Whale, happened. And the main star of that is Brendan Fraser. And there's a video going around that's going viral of Brendan Fraser getting a the movie got a 6 minute standing ovation, but he got a lot of love and has been getting a lot of love on social media. And this is someone who kind of disappeared. I believe he had some personal issues. I haven't looked too deep into it, but he seems a whole lot happier than he's been in a while. So all the more power to him. And it inspired me to look up some stuff about great actors who made a comeback. And so I found an article from MovieWeb called "These Are Five Actors Who Made Late Career Comebacks." So thought that would be fun to talk about. So Jacob, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, starting off the list, we have Matthew McConaughey. Now that's a name that nowadays, like, McConaughey is awesome, but I think for a good chunk of time he was only really known for like the rom-com side of things, like How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days or something like that. But now he's won an Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club, he's in Interstellar, he's in True Detective. I've been wanting to read his book, Green Lights. I've heard nothing but amazing things about it, but I want to read that. But I mean, Matthew McConaughey just kind of like disappeared, but then in like the 2010s, it's like he like something happened to where it was like he came back and he came roaring back.
Yeah, that's a good choice. And that's something you take for granted because, like you said, Matthew McConaughey, he's been in hit after hit after hit after hit these past decades, but you forget originally he did all those rom-coms and it got to a point where it became a joke and people couldn't take him seriously as an actor, even though he's fun to watch. But I'm glad he made that career resurgence. I think it was Dallas Buyers Club, I think was his resurgence. And he's continued to grow ever since. Like, I love his performance in Interstellar, probably the best I've seen him in of the stuff I've seen. But even in his early career, like, I can enjoy some of his early roles. Like, I don't know, Ryan, if you've seen the 2005 action film Sahara, which he starred in with Penelope Cruz.
I've heard of it, I've never seen
It it's one of my soft spot movies. I can't necessarily say it's a great action film, but it's one I've enjoyed since I was a kid, and I'm still a big fan of it to this day. And it's one I do associate a lot with Matthew McConaughey, even though it was not a big hit at the time. So yeah, McConaughey is just a great actor all around. I'm glad he's more respected now than he was when he started.
Yeah, and I also recommend that everyone hunt down the speech that he gave. It was a commencement speech, I believe, for the University of Houston. Like, that speech is so good. It is like that and Denzel Washington's commencement speech at the University of Pennsylvania, I believe. both of those speeches are just awesome. The highlight for McConaughey's one for me is like he gives like a bunch of like rules for life, and he talks about rule number one being life is not easy. And he says, life is not easy. Don't try to make it that way. Life is not fair. It wasn't back then. It wasn't now, and it never will be. Do not fall into the trap, the entitlement trap that I see so many people falling into today. And he obviously does it a lot better than I just did, but I love that speech to pieces. So I recommend everyone hunt that one down. I believe it's all on YouTube somewhere.
All right, awesome.
Hey, next up, and this was a little weird at first, but I guess it does make sense. Mickey Rourke, and talk about someone who Darren Aronofsky also resurrected. I guess Aronofsky has a talent for that because he being Rourke disappeared for a while. Then he appeared in Sin City, and then he almost won an Oscar for The Wrestler, which was a Darren Aronofsky joint. And then he was a villain in Iron Man 2, which is a lesser MCU film, but I mean, he was there. So that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And if you look up Mickey Rourke as an actor, he had so many problems in between what he did before and where he is now. Because if you watch some of Mickey Rourke's early films, like he was actually a pretty boy. Like he was a big, attractive dude that a lot of ladies looked up to. They loved him for his looks, and he was a really handsome dude. But then drugs and booze and a failed plastic surgery really messed him up, and he definitely doesn't have the same looks now that he had back in the 80s. But he, I would say, acting wise, is he's 10 times better now than he was back then. Like one of his early roles he was in, I think Francis Ford Coppola's Rumblefish. He starred in that.
Mhm.
He's pretty solid in that movie. But you know, when I think Mickey Rourke, I mostly think of him as the wrestler, which he was phenomenal in that movie. If you haven't seen it,
Yeah, and he was also in that weird sex movie 9.5 Weeks. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one.
no,
It was considered like 50 Shades of Grey before 50 Shades of Grey.
oh, I think I'll pass on that one.
Yeah. Well, number three on this list is Marlon Brando. Now, talk about someone who in like the 50s and 60s, he was a big deal, but then he was in The Godfather and it was like everything changed. And there are stories now about Marlon Brando about how difficult he was to work with, and even on The Godfather, he had to like have cue cards like strategically placed on the set because he was too lazy to learn his lines. But I mean, you'll watch Vito Corleone and you're just like, wow, this performance is so wonderful. It's so good, especially the morgue scene where it's like, look at how they massacred my boy, and he just breaks down. It's so good. And then afterwards, he was in Apocalypse Now, which the famous story is that he was supposed to be more involved in that, but he was too out of shape. But Coppola managed to find a way around it to where he was somehow more frightening because you didn't see him. So Marlon Brando is definitely someone who he he definitely had a sizable comeback, I would say.
Yeah, I think in the 70s was definitely his big comeback with roles like The Godfather and then Jor-El and Superman, where even though he was only in there for like 20 minutes, he left such a big impression on that movie and the life lessons that he brought that instilled in his son who became Superman. And he was great in that movie along with Apocalypse Now. And even in his early years before he had the big downward spiral in the 60s where a lot of his movies were flops and stuff. I mean, you got to look at A Streetcar Named Desire and On the Waterfront, and he was having so many groundbreaking, trailblazing performances. I think Brando was like one of the actors that invented the term method acting, where he literally transformed into a character every movie he was in. So he definitely changed the landscape of acting for better or for worse, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And and definitely one of the great ones when he was motivated to, uh, at the very least. And then The penultimate choice that I saw in here was John Travolta. This was someone who started off hot with like Saturday Night Fever and Grease, but then took a sizable dip. But then Pulp Fiction gave him life again. And Travolta's made some weird choices in his film career, to say the least. I mean, just a couple of years ago, he was in that movie The Fanatic, which I heard was awful,
I've
with
seen it. It's so bad it's good.
directed by Limp Bizkit frontman Fred Durst, of all people.
It's it's so bad.
But but Travolta was Robert Shapiro in The People versus O.J. Simpson, and I heard he was really good in that. So he's still getting work, it seems.
Yeah, I think John Travolta, you can describe his career as a career of peaks and valleys. He has his highs with Grease, Saturday Night Fever, took some dips. Pulp Fiction brought him back up again, along with Face Off. Battlefield Earth dropped him down again. He did Taking a Film 1, 2, 3, was excellent in that movie. Then he did Old Dogs and Gotti and that Fanatic movie. He's down again. So he's kind of been up and down as an actor, but he's always committed to his roles regardless of the quality. You got to give him credit for that at least.
Yeah, I actually do have a John Travolta story. This was before I was born, but my dad used to work at this golf course called Sugar Mill, and he worked in at golf courses for about 20 plus years, maybe more. He one of his first jobs was working at Sugar Mill and is in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. John Travolta has or at least had a house there, and because Sugar Mill is a very affluent aviation community as well as a golf community, and John Travolta is an avid flyer, in case you all didn't know. Well, one day my dad's working the front counter, he's in the pro shop, and John Travolta just casually walks in, and and like my dad and he just have this conversation, and they shake hands, and he gives him a Christmas present, he being John Travolta, to my dad, just this pen, and I believe it says JT on the side of it. And my dad loves to tell that story, and it's so crazy because I would have loved to have been there, but I was just a thought in my dad's head back then. But that's my John Travolta story that I wasn't even there for.
Wow, that's a pretty awesome story there. Something you can share even, to your kids, even though you weren't there. But you can say, hey, look, future kids of mine, your grandfather met John Travolta.
Yeah, it's a small world for sure. And the last name on the list, and I think this dude takes the cake for comebacks, Robert Downey Jr. I
Yep.
mean, like he takes the cake. I mean, this dude, and I've maintained that there's a generation of people who just know him as Iron Man. But take a look at roles like Chaplin, for example. The dude was nominated for an Oscar for that, and he did a phenomenal job there. Chaplin's one of my favorite biopics. But of course, RDJ had a massive drug problem. He's talked about that forever and ever, and I don't want to bring it up here. But basically, due to guys like Richard Linklater, he got back on the horse, and then he starred in, I believe it was Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and then he was in Iron Man, and the rest, as they say, is history. Let's just say Mr. Downey doesn't need to work ever again. Like that dude's gonna be, he's doing okay. And I mean, people have many critiques about the MCU, but the most consistent one is they got the perfect Iron Man, and they just nailed it. They nailed it right on the head. And I've heard rumors over the years that they tried to do an Iron Man movie with like Tom Cruise as Tony Stark, which I'm sure he would have made it work in his own way. You can't imagine Iron Man without Robert Downey Jr. You just can't.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm glad John Favreau took the risk and picked Robert Downey Jr. I know even John Favreau had a lot of pushback from that at the time because he was uninsurable at the time. A lot of studios weren't taking a chance on him because he had that time in prison. He was addicted to drugs. He was trying to he was starting to come clean, but he still wasn't 100% there yet. And John Favreau's like, look, Tony Stark and Robert Downey Jr. are kind of parallel with one another. They both have their egos, they both have their problems, but this could be the opportunity to change them for the better. Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man, and thank God he got the right call, because you can't picture any other actor playing him. And I know he was a good actor before the problems, and he had some good roles in there, but Iron Man is the movie, and all the MCU stuff in general. That's what has defined Robert Downey Jr. And yeah, you can't really think of any other actor playing this character, and you can't. I mean, he's had other good movie roles too, and I've been a fan of some of his other movies. If you haven't seen Zodiac, David Fincher's film, he was in that and was pretty awesome in there as well. Yeah, and I also like them as Sherlock Holmes as well. So there's been some good performances he's given even alongside the MCU. Yeah, he's a pretty awesome actor, and I'm glad that he's probably had the biggest comeback story out of any actor in recent years.
He did do Doolittle, but less said about that.
Aside from that, but he's going to be in Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's new movie, so his career's not dead. That's for sure.
No, no, his career is not dead. It is most assuredly alive. And, I actually, in the run up to Doolittle, he was on the Joe Rogan Experience. And I don't listen to a ton of Joe Rogan. I listen to select episodes like Ryan Holiday, the writer of books like The Daily Stoic, for example. If I'm intrigued by the guest, I will listen. But Robert Downey Jr. was on there, and just hearing like the two go back and forth, it was just so much fun. And that and Robert Downey Jr. on Inside the Actors Studio, I recommend both of those wholeheartedly. Those are just two great interviews. But I'm thankful that we have Robert Downey Jr. around, and that he turned his life around, and that he is among us now. And the MCU definitely feels a lot emptier now that he's gone. I'm glad that they gave him the hero send off. I don't think they could have done any more with that character. I mean, they wrote him off in the best way possible. That is my point.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Robert Downey Jr. is such a gifted actor, that's for sure. And I got to bring up Tropic Thunder. He is just as awesome in that movie too. I'm the dude playing a dude disguised as another dude.
You, I also I have I don't think I don't think I've actually seen that movie. I've only seen like segments of it, like the aforementioned stuff with Downey Jr., a actor who is so method that to play a black man he on pack face. But I love like the fake trailer in the movie where Downey Jr. and Tobey Maguire play monks who get into a romantic relationship.
It's pretty much Downton. No, it's pretty much Brokeback Mountain in a church, pretty much.
That movie is so nuts. I need to finally sit down and watch that. But
I actually rewatched that the other day, and I did a collab with another YouTuber. It is great.
yeah, well, can you all think of any other actors who have made comebacks? Leave them in the comments. We'd love to read what you have to say. And this is not the preview. Like we're not doing a monthly preview yet. But Jacob, are you excited to see The Whale when it finally comes out?
I mean, Darren Aronofsky is kind of hit and miss for me. Like, I respect a lot of the craft in his movies, but they just don't really resonate with me personally. He makes some weird movies, but I am intrigued to see it just on the strength of it being Brendan Fraser's comeback role. I think his comeback would have been larger if Batgirl hadn't gotten shelved, as he was supposed to be playing the villain in that. But I'm still glad that we at least have The Whale coming out. He's already getting early acclaim for his role in that movie. And if he gets Oscar nominated, I think that'd be pretty cool too. So, yeah, I'm excited to see The Whale just on the strength of Brendan Fraser coming back, and it looks like it could be his best performance. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, I agree. And well, that's another episode in the books. Thank you all so much for watching. Jacob, tell the people where they can find you.
Well, they can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Facebook. And of course, you can subscribe to my 2 YouTube channels. My second channel, Storytime with Jacob, is where I do all the read alongs and book reviews. I just finished The Outsiders as of recording this podcast, a great book which I had never read before. I actually like it better than the movie. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but I thought it was a fantastic book. And over on my main channel, I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, all that fun stuff. At the time of recording, I just reviewed episode 11 of Downton Abbey, and I just recently covered the Disney Channel original film You Wish for my Celebrating Disney series. I've also been covering the sitcom Full House recently on my channel, and I've done reviews of that. My recent video where I covered episodes 9 to 12, 2 days after it dropped, has 115 views. I wasn't expecting to get much traction on that show, but thank you to all who watched that. I wasn't expecting much out of that, but yeah, I think I'll be covering more sitcoms in the foreseeable future. And then coming to my channel this week, I got 2 Richard Donner reviews coming up for Timeline, and also, as Ryan mentioned, the live stream will be doing this Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on its last film, 16 Blocks. I also got reviews coming up for Home on the Range for my Celebrating Disney series, and I said last week I was doing The Crow. I'm promise I'm going to do The Crow this week, which I can't wait to dive into that for my Superhero Saturday series. So, a lot of content, even though I've scaled back, there's still some good content coming on the channel this week. And if you haven't, feel free to like and subscribe to my channels.
Yeah, and definitely go subscribe, especially both of his channels, yes. But if you'd like to see me and him talk about 16 blocks, do subscribe to his main channel. It'll be the first one listed there. As for this channel, like I said, I have a lot of new people watching. I believe I'm at 282 subscribers. I'm within striking distance of 300. So thank you all for subscribing and checking me out. I'm planning to see both Medieval and, let me see, Medieval, and there was one other one.
Is
It
it that
was
Barbarian movie?
Barbarian, thank you. Seeing at least those two, and Pinocchio if I can get away with it, and I will try to review those. And then this coming Sunday will be my deep dive into one of my favorite movies of all time, 1997's Good Will Hunting, and I'm so looking forward to doing that. But that is all for the both of us. Thank you so much for watching. That is Jacob Martin. My name is Ryan Cam. We will see you in the next one. Take care.